Today we are diving into the absolutely wild story of Harshavardhana. He was a 7th century Indian ruler who built a massive empire, but not in the way you'd think. His story is all about vengeance, ambition, and, surprisingly, culture.
Right, so Harsha's path to the throne is anything but ordinary. You know, this isn't a story about a peaceful handover of power. His entire empire was basically born from the fire of a brutal family tragedy, one that shoved him into a role he never, ever expected to have.
So to really get who Harsha was, you have to understand the moment he was born into. And that moment was absolute chaos. We're starting with the kingdom in total crisis, the sudden violent collapse of his family, the House of Vardhana.
So, who exactly were they? Well, Harsha was part of the Pushyabhuti dynasty. They were this powerful ruling family based in a place called Staneshwara, which is in modern-day Haryana, India. They'd become a pretty big deal in the north, especially after the great Gupta Empire started to fade.
But all that stability they'd built, it's about to be completely shattered. The peace is broken when a rival king, a guy named Shashanka, launches an attack. And this wasn't just a political move, you know. It was personal. It was a vicious betrayal aimed right at the heart of the royal family.
And it's out of this complete disaster that our main character emerges. This is where personal tragedy gets twisted into a political mission. A vow of vengeance is taken, all because a teenager is literally forced onto the throne to lead his people.
Okay, so let's just break down how incredibly fast everything went wrong. It was this devastating chain reaction. First, boom, Harsha's brother-in-law is murdered. Then his sister, Rajyashri, gets thrown in prison. His older brother, Rajyavardhana, who is now the king, marches off to get revenge, and he gets killed by the same rival, Shashanka. In what feels like an instant, the kingdom has no leader. It is a complete and utter catastrophe.
And who's left to pick up all these pieces? A kid. Harshavardhana takes the throne in the year 606 AD. He's just 16 years old. Can you even imagine all of that weight? The future of the entire kingdom, his family's honor, it all comes crashing down on his shoulders.
So he doesn't just get a crown, he gets a cause. His entire reign kicks off with two incredibly personal, all-consuming goals: avenge his murdered brother and rescue his captured sister. This isn't about politics anymore. This is what's driving him.
But here's the thing. Harsha was meant for more than just revenge. That personal quest for justice, it quickly snowballs into a massive campaign of conquest, turning him from an avenger into one of India's great empire builders and administrators.
His first move? Super smart. He makes an alliance with another king to go after Shashanka. And it turns out he's a pretty brilliant military leader. He successfully conquers these really powerful eastern regions. But his ambition did have its limits. When he tried to push his empire further south, he was stopped dead in his tracks at the Narmada River by another powerful king, Pulakeshin II.
And this is where we see what really made him a different kind of ruler. Look at how he managed the empire's money. The state revenue was split into 4 equal parts. I mean, think about that for a second. Only a quarter of it went to the king. The rest was specifically set aside to support scholars, to pay public servants, and to fund religious activities. That's an incredibly organized, almost modern way of thinking about the public good. And if we dig a little deeper into his system, we find that his taxes were actually pretty light for the time. He also kept careful public records, basically an archive of everything that happened, good and bad. And this is a big one. He started paying his officers with grants of land instead of cash salaries. This one change kind of kicked off a shift towards a more feudal-style system in the region.
Okay, but this is where Harsha's story gets truly unique. He wasn't just a general and a governor. No, he was also a man of deep culture, a genuine, honest-to-goodness scholar who just happened to also be an emperor.
Get this, on top of conquering kingdoms and running an empire, he was also an accomplished playwright. He wrote 3 famous plays in Sanskrit, Nagananda, Ratnavali, and Priyadarsika. It's just such a rare and amazing combination of skills, right?
And his work still echoes today. One of his plays, Ratnavali, actually has one of the first literary references we know of to the Festival of Holi. That is a direct 1,400-year-old link from his writing to a tradition celebrated by millions of people right now. How cool is that?
And his love for learning wasn't just about his own writing. He was a huge supporter of Nalanda University, which at the time was one of the most important centers of learning in the entire world. His funding and support really helped it flourish.
So you might be wondering, how do we know all this stuff in such detail? Well, we're really lucky to have two incredible historical sources. First, the Harsha, which is a biography written by his own court poet, Banabhatta. And second, we have the super detailed records of Xuanzang, a Chinese Buddhist monk who traveled all over India and spent a ton of time in Harsha's court.
So, as his long reign finally came to a close, what did he leave behind? What was his legacy? Let's take a look at the final chapter of his empire and his lasting impact as one of India's great unifiers. When you boil it all down, his biggest legacy is that he marks the end of an era. He really was the last great emperor to rule over a huge, unified, homegrown empire in northern India. After he was gone, a whole new period of invasions and fragmentation began, and it would reshape the subcontinent for centuries. In the end, he was so many things all at once. A conqueror, born from a family tragedy. A sharp and fair administrator who organized a massive state. And a refined scholar who actually added to his culture's art and learning.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. When you look at a life like his, this wild mix of personal revenge, imperial power, and cultural creation, it really makes you wonder, what is it that actually makes a ruler great? Is it the lands they conquer, the culture they build, or is it the character they show when everything falls apart? Definitely something to think about.